keep from calling it what it actually is. These nationalist elements actually serve their purpose in that sense. They gave respectability to the civil rights groups and gave acceptability to the civil rights groups. 10 years ago or more, the NAACP was looked upon as a radical, leftist, almost subversive movement. And then when the black Muslim movement came along, the power structure said, thank the Lord for Roy Wilkins and the NAACP. In the Congo also, the People's Republic of the Congo, headquartered at Stanleyville, fought the war for freedom against Chomby, who was an agent of Western imperialism. And by Western imperialism, I mean that which is headquartered in the United States, in the State Department. In 1964, this government, subsidizing Chomby, the murderer of Lumumba, and Chomby's mercenaries, hired killers from South Africa, along with the former colonial power Belgium, dropped paratroopers on the people of the Congo, used Cubans that they had trained to drop bombs on the people of the Congo with American-made planes. To no avail. The struggle is still going on, and America's man Chomby is still losing. All of this in 1964. Now, in speaking like this, it doesn't mean that I'm anti-American. I'm not. I'm not anti-American or un-American. And I'm not saying that to defend myself, because if I was that, I'd have a right to be that after what America has done to us. This government should be lucky that our people aren't anti-American. They should get down on your hands and knees every morning and thank God that 22 million black people have not become anti-American. Because if anybody has a right to be anti-American, we have. You've given us every right to it. And the whole world would side with us if we became anti-American. You know, that's something to think about. But we're not anti-American. But we see we are anti or against what America is doing wrong in other parts of the world as well as here. And what she did in the Congo in 1964 is wrong. It's criminal. Criminal. And what she did to the American public, to get the American public to go along with it, is criminal. What she's doing in South Vietnam is criminal. She's causing American soldiers to be murdered every day, killed every day, die every day, for no reason at all. That's wrong. Now, you're not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality. Wrong is wrong no matter who does it or who says it. Now, if I'm anti-American for saying that, then Wayne Morris is anti-American. Church, senator from somewhere out there, is anti-American. A whole lot of them in Washington, D.C. is anti-American. So I'm just telling you what I read the good senators said. Also in 1964, China exploded her bomb, which was a scientific breakthrough for the oppressed people in China who suffered for a long time. I, for one, was very happy to hear that the great people of China were able to display their scientific advanced knowledge of science to the point where a country that is so backward, as this country keeps saying, and so, you know, behind everybody and so poor, could come up with an atomic bomb. Why, I had to marvel at that. It made me realize that poor people can do it as well as rich people. of these little advances were made by oppressed people in other parts of the world during 1964. These were tangible gains. And the reason that they were able to make these gains, they realized that power was the magic word. Power against power. Power in defense of freedom is greater than power in behalf of tyranny and oppression. Because power, real power, comes from conviction, and it produces action, uncompromising action. It also produces insurrection against oppression. This is the only way you end oppression, with power. Power never takes a back step, only in the face of more power. Power doesn't back up in the face of a smile, or in the face of a prayer, or in the face of some kind of nonviolent loving action. Power, it's not the nature of power to back up in the face of anything but some more power. And this is what the people have realized in Southeast Asia, in the Congo, in Cuba, in other parts of the world, that power recognizes only power. And all of them who realize this have made gains. Now here in America, it's different. When you compare our strides in 1964 with strides that have been made forward by people elsewhere all over the world, only then can you appreciate the great double cross experienced by black people here in America in 1964. The power structure started the new year out the same way they started that out in Washington the other day, only now they call it, what's that, the Great Society? The Great Society. Last year, 1964 was supposed to be the year of promise. They opened up the new year in Washington, D.C., and in the City Hall, and in Albany, talking about the year of promise. Promise that black people would make advances in education, we'd get better schools, better school facilities, better teachers, that jobs would open up. There would be less black people in the unemployment line. That in areas of the South where we formerly had not been able to vote, we would be able to register and vote. That we would become socially acceptable to those who in the past did not consider us socially acceptable.
At ASUS Online, we understand that online learners have unique goals and busy lives, which is why our stackable programs offer a modular approach to education. You can start with a course that provides you with immediate skills and knowledge and can also build towards a certificate. Our graduate certificates can then stack towards a master's degree. Join us at ASUS Online, where education is accessible, flexible, and designed with you in mind.
But by the end of 1964, we had to agree that instead of the year of promise, instead of these promises materializing, they substituted devices to create the illusion of progress. And 1964 was the year of illusion and delusion. We received nothing but a promise. We received nothing that would actually solve the problems that we were confronted by in January of 1964. In 1963, they had used a trick. One of their devices to let off the steam of frustration was the March on Washington. They used that to make us think we were making progress. Imagine marching to Washington and getting nothing for it whatsoever. But it shows you how shrewd the power structure is. It manipulates the people through the leaders, as long as the people believe in the leaders. In 63, it was the March on Washington. In 64, what was it? The Civil Rights Bill. Right after they passed the Civil Rights Bill, they murdered a Negro in Georgia and did nothing about it. Murdered 2 whites and a Negro in Mississippi and did nothing about it. So that the Civil Rights Bill has produced nothing where we're concerned. It was only a valve, a vent, that would enable us, that was designed to enable us to let off our frustration. But the bill itself was not designed to solve our problems. Since we see what they did in 1963 and we saw what they did in 1964, what will they do now in 1965? If the March on Washington was supposed to lessen the explosion, and the Civil Rights Bill was designed to lessen the explosion, it's all it was designed to do. It wasn't designed to solve the problem. It was designed to lessen the explosion. Because everyone in his right mind knows there should have been an explosion. You can't have all those ingredients, those explosive ingredients that exist in Harlem and elsewhere where our people suffer, and not have an explosion. So these are devices to lessen the danger of the explosion, but not designed to remove the material that's going to explode. What will they give us in 1965? I just read where they plan to make a black cabinet member. Yes, they have a new gimmick every year. They're going to take one of their boys, black boys, and put him in the cabinet so he can walk around Washington with a cigar, fire on one end and fool on the other end.
At this point in the speech, Malcolm X becomes even more direct. He doesn't soften his words. He doesn't try to sound diplomatic. He explains that power only responds to one thing: more power. It doesn't step aside when someone smiles. It doesn't change because someone prays. It doesn't move when someone chooses nonviolence. He says clearly that the nature of power is to keep control unless something stronger forces it to change. He uses examples from Southeast Asia, the Congo, and Cuba to show that people in other countries understand this. They have taken control of their own freedom by pushing back against power in ways that can't be ignored. He makes it clear that the people there are not confused about how real change happens. Then Malcolm shifts his focus back to the United States. He looks at 1964 not as a year of victory, but as a year of false promises. He says that black people in America were promised better education, better jobs, and more political rights. He lists each promise: better schools, better teachers, more job opportunities, the right to vote, the hope of being accepted socially. But by the end of the year, none of it had come true. The government didn't deliver results. It delivered distractions. Malcolm calls 1964 a year of illusion and delusion. The people were told they were making progress, but nothing actually changed. Nothing was solved. He reminds the audience that in 1963, the March on Washington was used to cool things down. It was meant to let people feel like something big was happening, even though it didn't bring any real solutions. Then in 1964, the Civil Rights Act became the new symbol. But it didn't stop the murders in Georgia and Mississippi. It didn't stop injustice. It didn't fix anything. He says these actions weren't meant to help. They were meant to stop people from getting too angry. The government wasn't trying to remove the reasons for rebellion. It was trying to manage emotions. Malcolm calls them what they are: tools. Tricks, not answers. Finally, he asks the most important question. If they used the March on Washington to quiet people in 1963 and used the Civil Rights Bill to do the same thing in 1964, what will they try next? He says there should have already been an explosion because the pain, the rage, and the injustice are still there. The government hasn't dealt with the root problems. It has only tried to stop people from reacting. Malcolm wants the audience to understand that these so-called solutions were never meant to solve anything. They were designed to delay the response. They were created to buy time. He warns that time is running out.
Have the causes that made it flow in 63 been removed? The causes are still there. How can you sit around and naively, in such a naive way, and make yourself think that things are getting better when the causes that created the bad conditions still remain. The only one whose problem is solved is the leader. They get the peace prize, while the people have no peace. Or as he himself said, while he's up on the mountain, the people are in the valley. Tonight, during the few moments that we have, we're going to have a little chat, like brothers and sisters and friends, and probably enemies too, about the prospects for peace or prospects for freedom in 1965. If you notice, I almost slipped there and said peace. Actually, you can't separate peace from freedom. No one can be at peace unless he has his freedom. You can't separate the two. And this is the thing that makes 1965 so explosive and so dangerous. The people in this country who in the past have been at peace and been peaceful were that way only because they didn't know what freedom was. They let somebody else define it for them. But today, 1965, you find those who have not had freedom and not in a position to define freedom. They're beginning to define it for themselves now. And as they get in a position intellectually to define freedom for themselves, they see that they don't have it. And it makes them less peaceful or less inclined toward peace.
Malcolm X opens this speech by confronting the false sense of peace in America. He questions who really benefits from the promises of freedom. His tone is sharp because the stakes are high. What he describes in 1965 still hits today: inequality, frustration, and the urgency to act. As the speech continues, he turns up the pressure. The next clips show him naming names, breaking down systems, and warning what's coming if things don't change.
So, in discussing this topic tonight, prospects for freedom in 1965, I think we have to go back at least 12 years or 10 years to the time when the struggle of the black man in America began to be projected into the limelight, not only in this country but throughout the world. It started primarily with the Supreme Court decision, so-called desegregation decision, and I should say so-called desegregation, so-called decision, because there has been some doubt as to what they really handed down. One of the main ingredients in the struggle of the black man in America for the past 12 years has been the black Muslim movement. No one can deny the role that the black Muslim movement has played in America during the past 12 years, has been one of the main ingredients in the stepped-up militancy on the part of black people throughout this country. No matter what direction the black Muslim movement itself was headed in, no matter what its own organizational philosophy was, and no matter what other people thought about it, no matter what their personal opinions were of the black Muslim movement, still it cannot be denied that that movement, because of its uncompromising stand and uncompromisingly militant approach to things, forced other civil rights organizations to be more militant than they normally would have been, and forced many of the civil rights leaders definitely to be more militant than they ever would have thought of being. So the militancy of the black man in America during the past 10 years, in my opinion, can be traced largely to the existence and presence of the movement, which I'm referring to now for purpose of identification as the black Muslim movement. Its contribution to the black struggle for freedom in this country was militancy. It made many of our people dare to get loud for the first time in 400 years. Many of the black leaders of the civil rights movement dare to get loud for the first time. I mean really loud, for the first time in nearly 400 years of our being in this country. They got more militant than they intended to be, and they made many of the people become more militant than they intended for the people to be. It had a chain reaction effect that actually got out of control somewhat, because the leaders themselves never intended and never do intend for our people to go too far. Their primary purpose in our midst has always been to contain our struggle, not lead our struggle. Proof of which, seldom are they seen until the irresponsible elements in the black community begin to explode. And then they go all the way around the country to grab one of them from wherever he's traveling and bring him in to cool things down, to tell us to be cool, or tell us to take it easy, don't rock the boat. This is their function, this is their role. At least it has been up until recent times. They never have been put in the role that they're in with the intention by the one who puts them there of them leading us into any uncompromising and militant struggle. But the existence of some of the Muslim groups and the black nationalist groups that couldn't be controlled by the power structure downtown, and I only use the